Robbie Wilkie with Fast Gardening Michigan, and today is going to be a fast gardening tip on how to make compost at home. There are two types of composting. You got hot composting and cold composting. Cold composting is going to take you a lot longer to make compost. That's where you take your kitchen scraps and stuff like that, just pile it in a compost bin, maybe turn it once in a while, and wait for about a year for it to decompose. With hot composting, you get really good compost in as little as 2 to 3 weeks. Starting out with the hot compost, we need two ingredients. We need carbon and nitrogen. You got your browns and your greens. You can scour the internet, and every website you click on is going to give you a different ratio of carbon to nitrogen, brown to green that you should be using in your compost, but it does not matter as much as people say it does. To prove it, let's take a look at the old chip drop I got behind me. This chip drop came loaded with our browns, the wood chips, and mixed in here I got pine needles, leaves. So this is already naturally decomposing. If I left this long enough and turned it, I could turn this whole thing into compost in about a year or two, but that's too long. We got to speed up the process. Take a look in here. She's already started. There is steam coming out of that pile, and it is very warm if you stick your hand in there. It's already breaking down pretty good. Besides using the wood chips in my garden, I'm going to show you how I utilize this pile from Chip Drop a little later in the video. But let's talk about what you can do at home if you don't want a giant pile of wood chips sitting in your driveway. Don't fall for those fancy compost tumblers you see on Amazon. It's a complete waste of time. If you have an empty space in your yard, that's all you need to get started. That and two ingredients. You need brown matter and green matter. Let's talk about different types of brown matter we can use in our compost. Wood chips, that's good, and this is free. If it's fall, you got leaves, go ahead and shred them up to speed up the process, or don't. You don't have to do it. Just makes it go a lot quicker if you do. Newspaper, paper towels, junk mail, cardboard boxes. These were going in a dumpster. That is recycling. What about greens? How are we gonna find anything green? You cut your lawn, that's a classic green right there. Pruning some trees or bushes, that's a lot of green matter right there. Stinging nettles, loaded with nutrients. Two of my favorites right here. Look at this. Look at that burdock leaf. That is a lot of green matter right there. Or this pokeweed. I just cut the berries off. Look how juicy that guy is. These things are super juicy, full of green matter. And don't forget the weeds out of your garden. If you do hot composting, it will kill all the roots that could spread and the seeds as well. If you're still worried about it, cut off the roots, cut off the seeds, and you're left with nothing but green. If you got some hay laying around, go ahead and throw that in there too. Whatever you choose for browns and greens is not that important. The most important thing is that when you're making this compost, you want to break down this material as small as possible. Now you don't have to break it down. It'll take a lot longer to compost. But if you take something like a chipper and use that to break down your browns and your greens, you'll be left with two materials that are very fine, and they will break down a lot quicker in your pile. I'd suggest gathering your browns first, and here's why. Brown matter without green mixed in it is kind of stagnant. Yes, it will break down if you leave it in the pile, but it takes a lot longer. Based on how much brown I can get, that kind of dictates how much green I want. I don't want to gather the green yet, because if you gather the greens, like grass clippings and stuff, as soon as you put it in a pile, it's going to start decomposing and it's going to turn into a mushy substance, and we don't want that. For shredding up my browns, I love this little wood chipper. Works pretty good. Takes these bigger wood chips, turns into a finer blend of wood chips. And I kind of just stack them in this trash can here. I'm going to try to fill this whole guy up because I know I got enough greens around here to make a big pile of compost. There is no golden ratio with compost, like I was saying. You mix browns and greens together, you're going to get some decomposition. That being said, I prefer 2 parts brown to 1 part green. Side note here, when you are making your compost, you're going to want to make as much as possible at a time. The bigger pile you get, the hotter the pile is going to get, and the quicker it's going to decompose. So make sure you get your browns first, and then come back for your greens. As far as our ratio, if I fill this whole tub up with browns, 2 to 1, that means I want to fill half with greens next time. They say don't compost stuff like meat, but I literally watched a guy compost his dead dog on YouTube a while back. Alright, just finished up shredding up my browns here. got this whole garbage can full. This is the area we're going to be doing my composting. So there is a little green mixed in here, so this is going to heat up and start composting. But browns will not turn to sludge like the greens. So what I'm going to do while I collect my greens, I'm just going to take this guy and dump it out. Just out here doing a little shopping by the raspberries. I see tons of burdock, got some saplings, and then there's the pokeweeds. Got a lot of pokeweeds back here. This is a good way to utilize a lot of these plants that we hate so much, like the burdocks and the pokeweeds, that you can't get rid of them no matter what you do. Their roots go down super deep and you can't even dig them out. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. You cut them down and compost them, and they just grow right back. I got a decent haul right now that I'm going to start out with. I'm going to run it through the shredder. If you don't have a wood chipper, I suggest getting one. This is pretty cool when it comes to composting. But if you don't have one, you can lay these out and run them over with a lawnmower, and it will do the same thing. You'll be really surprised at how small a big pile like this gets. All of that only breaks down to less than a 5-gallon bucket. So that's where grass clippings and hay really help to fill her out. The grass clippings are really great for composting. It's like being a compost farmer. You just get out here, just mow her down, and check it out. We already got our ratio we need to make our compost. Check it out. There is our browns we collected earlier, where we filled up this garbage can almost all the way full. And we just harvested some fresh greens from the lawn, mixed in with some of those weeds I found earlier. Almost halfway in here. So we have our 2-to-1 ratio. Now my brown's sitting out here did get kind of hot because there are some greens mixed in here. So it's a little warm on the inside here. But other than that, not much has happened with this brown material. The magic really happens when we mix the fresh greens, they gotta be fresh, with the browns. So right now, I'm going to take these greens, I'm going to dump them out right next to the browns. These browns and these greens are really excited to get put together to become soil. And there's a couple different ways of doing it. I'm going to show you 2 different ways you can do it. You could take these 2 piles and just take something like a pitchfork and just mix them together. Or another way is layering, where you start out with a layer of browns, come back with a layer of greens that's half as big, and keep stacking it till you run out of material, and your top layer is going to be browns. Now, that way works pretty good. It's supposed to be good for airflow going through your compost pile. But I'm more of a fan of getting a little bit more mixture in between this. So you could also do this on the ground, but I like putting it back inside the garbage can to make a big pile inside there. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start out with some of these browns. I'm just going to put maybe a couple inches or so of browns at the bottom of this garbage can. We'll go from there. The browns are in. Now it's time to add some greens to it. Usually take a handful, just kind of shake it in there. I can still see brown underneath it. Once I get that, I'm going to come back, just take some more browns, do the same thing. A little bit more brown this time than the green. Come back to the greens. I'm just kind of doing a pretty decent mixture here. We're not doing complete layers of browns and greens. I've noticed that my piles get a lot hotter if I do a little bit of extra mixing here. This would work a lot better with a shovel, but because I'm filming, I'm doing it like this, and it's really not a lot of matter we're working with here. And even this way, it shouldn't take that long to add all this stuff together and get it inside this garbage can. When you start to get around halfway, this is also a perfect time to add odd stuff like junk mail from the tax collector, or paper plates, paper towels, stuff like that that really doesn't decompose that quick. If you get it in towards the middle here, it's going to be in the center of the pile and it's going to heat up the quickest. What you want to do too, as you're putting these layers in, doesn't have to be every layer, but you're going to want to keep this somewhat moist. So these fresh greens got a lot of moisture in them, so we're just supplementing it a little bit, and we're not adding too much, just a little bit at a time. Notice how everything in here is spread out. I got no big clumps of grass or anything like that. Clumps make this take longer to compost. And this is about hot speed composting to get compost fast. So we want to make sure none of that's in there. Also look at how my browns and greens are kind of blended in here. Now that we're filled up with this awesome blend of browns and greens in this garbage can, it's time to dump them out. All right, she's out. Now all these pieces that fell off to the side, just gonna kind of push them over the top here. We want a taller pile for this compost pile. All the heat's gonna be generated in the middle of this thing, so we're not too concerned about these outsides. Just wanna get all this stuff right on top, just like that. Look at that. Nice pile right there. A nice sunny spot is gonna help you out a lot with your compost. It's gonna help it heat up a lot faster. Let's take a look at 4-day old compost. So this pile was the same size as this one just 4 days ago. And look at that, she's already shrunk. And if you wanna see if it's working, here's the test right here. You peel back the top and just look at that steam coming out of there. She's a hot one. That's a hot pile right there. I'm not gonna be like the other videos where I stick a thermometer in here and check my temperatures. All I know is if I stick my hand in here, it's like really hard to even do it. It is hot to the touch. Look at that. Just look at that steam coming off of there. This pile is really going at it. This is where the work kicks in with hot composting. So it's been about 4 days now. We're super hot in the middle, but the outsides are not doing much. So we want to take this pile, spread it out a little bit, and then take those outsides and move them to the inside so they can also heat up. When you're mixing these piles together, this is also a perfect time to add more greens if you need them. If you notice that you got a lot of browns in here that aren't broken down, when you're mixing it, just add some more greens inside there and make sure to check it for moisture as well. You're gonna wanna add moisture if it's getting kind of dry in there. But don't go nuts with the water. We're not trying to make slime here. We're trying to make compost. The water is just helping out these microorganisms so they can help break down this compost. Go on a 3 or 4 day cycle and check your piles. Mix them up, add greens if you need to, add water if you need to, and do the hand test. Stick your hand in there. It's pretty gross. You'll wash your hands afterwards. But if it's too hot to touch or it feels uncomfortable in there, you're doing a good job. That's what we're trying to get here. We want this pile to heat up on the inside, and we flip the stuff from the outside to the inside. And we want to keep doing that till everything is so hot that it just starts to break down. And the final product is going to be awesome compost within a period of weeks. New pile, old pile. We're starting to get there. 4 days. Imagine what it looks like weeks from now. If you really want to speed up your compost, go ahead and toss a tarp on top of your compost. But don't completely cover it. Leave some sides open so air can get in there. This one's a little bit older, but inside here is super hot. Look at that. It's already starting to break down into really good compost. If you use this hot compost method and you check your compost every 3 or 4 days or so and give it the moisture it needs and turn the piles, within a few weeks you can expect great compost that you can plant directly into or spread it on your plants as mulch, or like I'm doing, just save it for next year. What about cold composting? This is not going to be as long because I'm not a huge fan of cold composting. It's really lazy composting. It's where you take all your kitchen scraps and stuff and you just pile it into a bin over time and then occasionally turn it. Maybe you bought something from Amazon that you can put all the compost in there and just spin it and over time, but it takes so long to break down. If you got the time to do it, that's perfectly fine. We don't want to waste any organic matter from our house. We don't want to toss it in the trash. It's better to make compost out of it. So if you're going to do it like this. Now, I don't have much of this going on. Here's one of my hot piles over here, but here's one of my cold piles where I've been putting stuff in here. We just had some lilies or something like that. I think this was growing in a driveway. Just tossed her in. I come out here every few days and just turn it over. These are pine shavings from the chicken coop last year, full of chicken manure. And if I dig in here, I mean, I got a slice of carrot in there and stuff too. If you're cold composting outside, you're basically just feeding worms and stuff. This is gonna break down because Mother Nature is gonna break it down. It's gonna take you a lot longer, but you can get some really good results out of this. Like I just showed you, I mean, this stuff here, I've planted directly into this material, even with these bigger chunks in here, and the plants love it. So if you don't want to do a lot of work, these pallets work out really good. At one point, I had this thing stacked really high, but the hot composting is just so much more effective. So if I can get a lot of material at once, I do it. But occasional scraps, they go right in here, mix it together. You get really down low in here, and most of this is done. Just keep adding to it. Sometimes I like to take some of this material too, once it's broken down or it's completely composted, and just add it in here, because when it gets cooler, a whole new set of organisms kick in. You get the fungi that don't like the heat will get in there, and they'll break down some of this material even a little bit more. So to make like the perfect compost, when you're done with hot and you move it to cold composting, you can really fire it up and really break it down, and you get extra nutrients that you wouldn't if you just did hot. Look at that, just turned her. Looks pretty good. This is also where you're gonna get a lot of your volunteer seeds. When you take this compost and put it in your garden, some of these seeds are gonna germinate because they did not get killed by hot composting. One thing I noticed about the volunteers is they do better than the stuff we plant. So if you throw stuff in here, put it in your garden, and you get seeds to grow, if you can, move those plants around if it's something you like, because you might be really surprised at the results. To me, this is a process that does not have to be overcomplicated. And I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube about this, and they put way too much thought into it. In nature, composting happens all the time. When the trees fall down, the branches hit the ground, the leaves hit the ground, the weeds die, it happens, it just takes a little bit longer. With these methods, the hot composting, we can accelerate it and make compost a lot faster than Mother Nature. Mother Nature does not use a thermometer. She doesn't buy compost bins on Amazon. She piles it up and it disintegrates and feeds the new growth for next year. Why not take these tips, speed up the process, and benefit your plants? I'm actually turning my whole entire quarter-acre garden into an active cold compost heap, using the power of Mother Nature to create fertile soil that's going to help my plants next year. Make sure you stay tuned to follow me along with that, because I will be making videos on it as part of my forward ecology gardening method that I have created over the past couple weeks, of putting a lot of thought into how nature gardens way better than we do. So stay tuned for that. I hope this composting video helps you out. And as always, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.